You're listening to Proudly Set, the LGBTQ plus community podcast where members of the community and their allies come together to share their experiences, tell their stories. I'm your host, John Hyland, and let's get into the next episode. I'm excited to be coming to you live from Gaydio Tower. At least that's what I want to call it anyway, because I can see all of Manchester from up here. I'm with the fabulous Lizzy Maginness, who is an sales account manager. Is that the right phrasing for the title?
I'm the commercial manager.
That sounds better.
Yeah.
That does sound better. Commercial manager here at Gaydio. How are you?
I'm very well, John. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for letting me get in here so bloody early on a Thursday morning.
Well, I appreciate you coming over from Liverpool this morning to lovely, not so sunny Manchester today.
I mean, I think that we had a nice bit of weather the last 2 days, and I think that is the spring summer, John. But no, I really appreciate it. I think it's nice to try to expand these stories, because as much as I've had loads going on in Liverpool, like, come on, I feel like Manchester right now is probably the gay capital of the city, of the country even.
Oh, 100%. I think it has been for a long time as well. I know I'm biased, but yeah, it's a great place to be queer, is Manchester.
I do like coming every so often, but I think then I do like to go home. So just let's start from where we are. We're in Gaydio. Like, how did you come to be working for Gaydio? You know, it's the nation's LGBT radio station.
It is, and not just radio station, like media brand, entertainment brand. We do events and all sorts as well. So I worked alongside Gaydio for a few years when I worked at Manchester Pride. So I got to know the team here quite well. They're a fantastic team, and they approached me at the back end of 2025 after I had been made redundant from my role at Manchester Pride after it went into liquidation. And they had a job coming up and wanted to know if I was interested. So came and had a chat, and the stars aligned. And I've been here now for 4 months.
That all?
Yeah, that is all. Yeah,
You've done a lot for 4 months.
It's been a whirlwind few months. But yeah, it's great. I feel very at home here. It's a brilliant team, and it's great to be on the 14th floor of Gaydio Towers with a great vantage point all the way out to the Peak District.
It is. I know you can't see this, but it is. Once you see past the buildings, it's a really nice.
Yeah,
really
you'll have
nice
to get
view.
some cutaways. You know, do a little.
So you've had a bit of a journey when it comes to, like, you know, your professional career. So we were talking a bit off camera, and this is like a bit of a full circle moment coming back to radio. So, like, just take me on that journey, like, from the start to where we are.
I think it was January 2012 that I started my career in media. I've been working in marketing roles for a good few years before that. My career spans about 20 years now.
Wow.
But yeah, I joined Real Radio back in 2012 in a marketing and events role. And I've just moved around from there, really, in the kind of radio and media space in Manchester. It's such a great hub, is Manchester for the creative industries and media industries. And yeah, I've done loads of crazy, weird and wonderful things throughout my career in radio, working for some of the most kind of iconic radio brands in the country. So Real Radio became Heart, and then I moved on to work for Smooth Radio, and then Real Radio Excess as well, which was a kind of rock alternative station based here in Manchester and also up in Glasgow. And then I moved over to the institution that was Key 103. And I was the marketing manager there for several years, and also worked on the rebrand. Key 103 is now known as Hits Radio and broadcasts nationwide. So I was part of that process, that rebrand as well.
So what is there a difference between? So was you marketing manager for all those different brands, or worked within the marketing team?
Yeah, so I started as a marketing and events executive. So I had a marketing manager that I reported into. You know, I was in my mid-20s, not long out of uni, and so kind of learnt my stripes there, really, and then progressed up into marketing manager, and the responsibilities and kind of leading the team and going from looking at regional radio stations to full UK-wide networks and, you know, big entertainment brands as they are now, not just radio stations.
So what does that kind of entail? Because I think when people think of marketing in general, I think most people think of like visual stuff and how they get that about. So when it comes to marketing a radio station, what was the kind of thing? What was like your day to day?
It's that cliche thing of like no 2 days were ever the same. Yeah. I mean, events was a huge part of it. So partnering on events that are already happening. So whether that's music festivals, concerts, we did all the kind of like Race for Lives and the Great Manchester Run and things like that. Connecting with the audiences that are already at those events. So we'd have street teams on the ground and kind of branding activations and activities that people can engage with and merchandise that we'd give out. We'd run competitions on air that would kind of connect with audiences and then have a sort of in-person element to those as well, get street teams out and about into workplaces and across the region. But I would also work on, you know, big above the line campaigns as well. So, you know, booking media across other channels, billboards, TV, etc.
What we call out of home.
Yeah. So it was, really, really varied and really exciting. And, you know, when I was at Key 103 and Hits Radio, we used to do these huge live events at the arena as well with like multi-artist lineups. And I mean, that was incredible to be filling arenas of like 15,000 people and working with some of the biggest pop stars in the country. It's really special. I feel like I've had a really privileged career. And
it sounds it. Like,
you know,
wow.
Growing up in the Lincolnshire countryside, you know.
Did you ever believe that was what we'd be doing?
Like in the middle of nowhere, like quite remote, you know, I don't think I ever imagined that this could be a career or this was a real job. So, I feel like I fell into it by accident, but it was absolutely what I was meant to be doing. And it's great to be back in radio now and working for such a fantastic and creative, fun brand as Gaydio.
It's interesting because I think you were saying off camera before, it was like what was the intention? So you come to study marketing in university? Was that what it was?
I did a business degree at Man Met, and I didn't really have a clue about what I wanted to do as a career. And my parents were fantastic that they never like forced me and my siblings to go down any kind of path. But because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, my dad sort of helped to guide me into business studies because it would give me kind of a good...
Yeah, a bit of an umbrella.
Yeah, good grounding. I did business studies A-level and I always enjoyed the kind of marketing side of things from that point of view. But I didn't want to pigeonhole myself at sort of 17, 18 because, you know, who knows at 17, 18 what they want to do for the rest of their life.
When they're in the 30s still as well, to be fair.
So I came and really it was the experience of moving to Manchester and, you know, moving across the Pennines and being in a big city. You know, it's not something I'd ever experienced before. Like I'd done sort of day trips out to the city, but, you know, I think when you grow up in rural areas, you know, where there are no sort of major cities really within close proximity, you can't really imagine what it's like to be somewhere that's so like diverse and multicultural and got so much going on. And I've just sort of was like, this is where I'm supposed to be now.
I made the connection. I can't help but I've got to do it. Because you're wearing green, which you're like Alphabet doing the one short day. The Emerald City, like, this is where I need to be.
You know, it is that kind of like, you know, starry lights and just like, what is this, you know? And I mean, Manchester's changed so much in those like 20 odd years since I moved here. And it's just a brilliant, vibrant place to be. Yeah.
You were talking before, just we move on to a bit more personal. You were saying just off camera before about an amazing relationship that you curated, shall we say, which is maybe one of the first, was when you were at Key 103 in the relationship with Manchester Pride, like way before you started working there, which is like a bit of a first, putting like a massive spotlight on this community.
Yeah. So as I said previously, one of the ways that radio stations would market themselves was to connect with big events that were happening in the city. And Manchester Pride was one of the kind of biggest,
if not
the biggest event that happened in Manchester city centre. You know, a huge weekend celebration, the massive parade that attracted huge audiences. And I think it was probably about 2015, I think this was. So we're going back a while here, but you know, the Pride movement was really gathering momentum. People wanted to celebrate LGBTQ plus communities.
Yeah, the 2010s were definitely something. That's when I first got involved in Pride, and I feel like that was the decade where all the brands wanted to get involved.
Yeah,
and stuff
exactly.
Like that.
It was when everyone was changing their logos across social media and stuff, but it was very much, I think, kind of a marketing-led activity at that point of view. Not that brands weren't engaging authentically, and Key 103 definitely was. You know, there was huge LGBTQ plus staff networks at Bauer and at Key 103, and so it was great for you know, my colleagues and myself to be able to celebrate our identities at that point in time. But yeah, I don't think any other kind of national radio station was partnering with a Pride organisation at the time. So I set up that partnership, and Key 103 sort of threw the kitchen sink at it. So
quite literally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which was great to have that support from the kind of my programming colleagues and the presenters and everybody wanting to get stuck in. So we led the parade and we broadcast live across the whole weekend. And that broadcast went out not just on Key 103 in Manchester, but was broadcast across the Bauer network as well.
Wow.
So
went out national.
Yeah, across the country. So in 2015, we were bringing a Pride event, a Pride celebration to the masses, you know, because Key 103 was a mainstream station. It wasn't a niche station for LGBTQ plus people. So I think, you know, it really helped to spread the message of the Pride movement and celebrate queer identities, and help to bring it to the masses in the way that we know it now. Well, actually, it feels like we're going backwards a little bit now. So I worked on that partnership and worked closely with Manchester Pride for I think it's 4 or 5 years. There was the massive year in 2019 when Ariana Grande
I was there.
Yeah, performed at Manchester Pride. So again, Key 103 had rebranded to Hits Radio by that point, but we had Hits Radio presenters hosting on stage. We were broadcasting backstage, and we brought our audiences all the kind of biggest interviews and stuff from that, and it was great celebration. And then obviously COVID hit
and it all changed.
There was no events, and that's when my career took a bit of a pivot as well. And it was 2021 that a role came up at Manchester Pride to lead the marketing team there. And so I think it was July 2021 I joined Manchester Pride
during the COVID times.
Yes. Well, I think it was about 6 weeks before the Manchester Pride celebration was due to take place in 2021, and it was one of the first live events that the country hosted post COVID. Obviously, there was the big concert in Liverpool that was the kind of the test event to see how live events would work in this kind of new post-COVID world. And then Manchester Pride came shortly after that. So that was definitely an interesting time. But, you know, we welcomed, I think it was like 50,000 people to the city.
I want to get out.
A huge concert down at First Street, and then of course the Gay Village Party, which is iconic, and the marches. We couldn't do a full parade as you would know and love it that year because of kind of social distancing things, but obviously it's important to have protest as part of Pride, so we still had some equality marches through the city as well.
I'm just curious because I feel like you've got both sides of the equation to think on it, just on that Pride question. So I know that Prides in general get criticised depending on the size, scale, what's involved. I've always said that every Pride has its place, and I think you've kind of said it straight away, and just what you've explained is I feel like Manchester Pride previous incarnations would be criticised for like certain elements, but I think that weekend is the nation's eyes are on the LGBTQ plus community, and I think that's really important personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've always championed Pride being a huge celebration, like a big concert and festival. And I know that that's kind of quite a controversial statement for some LGBTQ plus communities that don't want it to be these big festivals. But I think by doing that, you are bringing queer culture and LGBTQ plus artists and performers and our identities to the mainstream. And that is a huge act of protest, in my opinion. And so I think it is a shame that these events do seem to be scaling back. And although I do think that grassroots celebrations are really important as well, and that we have to remember the communities that we're serving and making sure we're creating safe spaces for those people, I also think that not being on a world stage and a national stage is regression rather than progression. So yeah, I know it has dividing opinions, but I think it is a real shame.
I think it can do both, as long as that element of protest, as you say, is still a core theme of Pride. It's like, come on, it's coming to 60 years soon since Stonewall. We can celebrate that journey.
Yeah. And I think, what Manchester Pride was really, really good at and probably didn't shout at about as much as it could have done is supporting grassroots celebrations as well. So although we were putting on the big citywide celebration and encouraging people from across the country, across Manchester, across the world to come and celebrate Pride in this city, we also distributed grants to other prides happening across the Greater Manchester boroughs, so whether it be Didsbury Pride or Bury Pride, for example, to make sure that those kind of grassroots celebrations can happen in those areas. They also supported really sort of niche groups as well that celebrated different intersectional identities. So if you didn't feel comfortable coming to a big concert with big crowds in the city centre, that you could go and do a knitting class with like-minded people, or go and find your people, your niche. And so without kind of Manchester Pride doing what it was doing on that scale, we weren't able to kind of support those grassroots events.
And I think that's the key point, is like, it is that wider scope, and Great Manchester's, let's be honest, it's the London of the North. So it's like, it's going to have those communities there. So to be able to highlight and support is important. So I'm just curious. So you mentioned that you came from a lovely rural village, came to the big city. You told me off camera that you came out later in life as a
pansexual, bisexual. Like, I change every day.
Fair enough.
I just it's about the person for me.
What was it? Was it kind of coming to the big city and opening your eyes more to stuff like that? It was like, oh, okay, or was it just something that you kind of realised?
It's an interesting one, really, and I do reflect on it because it is kind of my journey, my experience, and like why I think I was 35 when I came out. I think 34, 35. But reflecting back, I think I've always known it. But if you can't see it, you can't be it. And growing up where I did in a rural area, I wasn't kind of exposed to any kind of queer culture. The TV that I watched, even, or the people that I was surrounded with, it just there was no such thing as a pride celebration. And it wasn't that I didn't have any kind of homophobia around me. It was just nothing. So
it just wasn't
kind of acknowledged. You'd see odd bits on TV, like I remember the EastEnders storyline, like back in the kind of late 90s, early noughties, I think it was. So things like that, but it wasn't really something that I ever thought about.
And it was always men, with the exception of Brookside. I feel like it was always men in the media moments.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I suppose because, when you are bisexual, it's easier to kind of lean into the straight side of your identity because, that's kind of the norm and the mainstream. And so that was kind of how I lived my life. But I came to Manchester and obviously got to meet lots of
different people.
diverse people. But even then, it wasn't something that I ever gave any thought to when I was at university, for example. And then, my friendship group, I had a lot of LGBTQ plus friends, and we always celebrated their identities. Like before I worked with Manchester Pride, I used to go to Manchester Pride with my friends. And even then I didn't have my gay awakening. And then it was kind of post-COVID, actually, and I think maybe consuming far too much lesbian TikTok, that I was like, hang on a minute, maybe...
Sorry, that tickled me.
And then that's just kind of when I realised that, I was queer. And I remember it was at a barbecue with my friends in the summer of 2021. And, we'd all been apart for such a long time, and I hadn't sort of spent that much time together with them as a group in person. And we'd obviously had a few too many to drink, but I felt like I was in a safe space, and with the Dutch courage.
It's always the Dutch courage.
I came out to my friends, and I was very emotional. It did feel like a huge relief to say it, and a release as well. And I, kind of got very upset, but, to say it out loud. And then I think it was like the next day I changed my hinge from...
Full-blown acceptance, and let's just do it.
From male to female. And, a few weeks later, I've met my now wife.
Oh, she did the typical lesbian thing of like, you're my person, straight away, let's move in together and get a cat.
Absolutely. Dog.
I'm a dog person as well.
But yeah, I've been single for a long time. I'd been single for about 6 years, and it just, never seemed to sort of slot into place. And then I went on my kind of first date with a female, and I was very nervous. Obviously kind of new experience, but we just hit it off straight away. Love and that. Fast forward 5 years and we're now married, and but yeah, it just felt right. It just felt like I found my person, and whereas it had never felt right with anyone else, I've now met the most like wonderful person who supports me, makes me laugh. We just have the most fun ever. And so it's kind of wild how quickly things can change, but I feel very lucky that I have had a safe space to kind of come out. And all of my friends and family, even though they had known me as straight for those 35 years beforehand, didn't bat an eyelid about it.
Both
really.
Friends and family.
They're pretty accepting of me, and so it's never sort of felt kind of a huge shift, really. It's more just like, oh, it was always like this, really. And I think perhaps maybe people do sense that and know that, and it doesn't come as a big shock to them.
And maybe it's a case of like, as you said before, it's like it's your journey. Whereas I find there's some people in the queer community who's like, just come on, just come out. But then there's others who are like, no, you live your truth.
Yeah, and now I feel like I've become a professional queer, and really kind of gone all in on queer media and queer culture and celebrating identities. But I think again, it's to show that can be different things to different people, and it's a spectrum, and so I'm just here to kind of bring that to more people, really.
I think that's beautiful though, because I think that is the important point, is like you found your person, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be, it's this, it's wrong, it's this, it's this. Just let people live in love.
Yeah, exactly. And that is 100% what it is. Like, love is love. I just love my wife, my person, and there's nothing more to it than that. It's, it's just about caring and happiness and tenderness and support and family,
whether that's actual blood or chosen.
Yeah, exactly.
So just curious, like this now full circle moment, you call yourself a professional queer. Do you try and bring that experience into what you do and how you can impact in things that you get involved in?
I've been very fortunate that I've been able to work with some huge global brands, and to help them to connect with LGBTQ plus audiences, and to make sure that they show up in an authentic way. So I think as a marketeer, I understand what marketers are trying to achieve. But at the same time, I think giving my lived experience as a queer person, I can make sure that they are always showing up authentically and can push back and challenge where needed, but also, kind of help them to celebrate some of the brilliant things that they are doing behind the scenes for queer communities, which is often overlooked. Whether it's by creating fantastic LGBTQ plus networks within their organisations, or funding projects, or educating people around the world to make it safer for people to travel to different countries, for example. So, there's lots of brilliant work going on by a lot of huge big name brands.
I love that. So I think just to close off a wee bit, if if you could give yourself, younger self, some wise words of wisdom knowing what you do now, what would you say to them?
I was such a shy, kind of awkward kid.
Really?
And I think I feel a lot more like confident in myself now. So I think I would just tell my younger self, like, you're on the right track. Believe in yourself. Be a little bit more confident. Don't be so scared. And stop caring what other people think.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that one. So if people want to find out a little bit more about yourself, what you do, Gaydio, etc., where can they go?
I probably the best place to get me is LinkedIn. Is
Professional queer.
Yeah, professional queer. Just search Lizzy Maginness on LinkedIn. My other social media is all kind of like locked down. So, but yeah, I'm always happy to connect and meet new people. So, at Gaydio, I can help you to connect with LGBTQ plus audiences across the UK. But we've got events and things you can get involved in, and I'm involved in lots of other projects. Like I'm working with a tech startup called Pixie. So they're developing a social network with queer safety at its core. So yeah, there are lots of little things that I can get involved in. So yeah, just come and say hello.
I love that, because sometimes you just can't help yourself, can you? It's like, oh, I like that project, I've just got to get involved.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in Manchester, and as you said, it's like the queer capital of the country, and so for projects like Pixie to be starting out right here in the heart of Manchester is fantastic, and yeah, it's exciting.
It is really exciting, and I just want to thank you so much for bringing me to Gaydio Tower.
Anytime, John.
And sharing your story, because that was quite an interesting story, just from your early life coming to Manchester, realizing a few different things, and your journey just from what you've done in that media space is phenomenal. So thank you for what you've done.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on.
No, appreciate it. And check us out next time. Make sure that you join the Front Row, which is our membership scheme. For less than £3, you get early access, a few early notes, and it keeps these conversations going. Because as we know, after the Gaydio Awards, if it isn't for us doing it ourselves to have authentic LGBTQ plus stories, they just wouldn't happen, I find.
No.
Next one. Thank you for listening to Proudly Said. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, check out the rest of our episodes where you listen to your podcasts. If you want to support the podcast and keep this conversation going, consider joining The Front Row, our exclusive membership program for less than £3 a month, where you get exclusive access and so much more. Check out our website for more information, proudlysaid.co.uk.